Have you ever looked at an avoidant person and asked yourself, if they feel so deeply, why do they act like they don't care at all? Why do they go quiet when things get real? Why do they pull away right when the connection starts feeling powerful? And the most painful question of all, how do you know when an avoidant is not just scared, but actually sees you as the one? Stay with me until the very end of this video, because what you are about to understand can save you from years of confusion. It can help you stop misreading distance as rejection, silence as indifference, and emotional struggle as a lack of love. Because the truth is, when an avoidant truly knows you are different, they do not always become easier to understand, but they do start becoming impossible to ignore. Most people think avoidants are simple. They think they are cold, detached, unavailable. They think avoidants just do not care enough to stay close. But human psychology tells a much deeper story. People who lean avoidant are often not running from love itself. They are running from what love forces them to feel. Because real closeness does not just bring comfort, it also brings exposure, it brings vulnerability, it brings the terrifying possibility that someone could finally reach the parts of them they have spent years trying to protect. And for an avoidant, that does not feel romantic at first. It feels dangerous. That is why so many people get confused by them. Because the more something matters to an avoidant, the less normal they may begin to act. The deeper the feeling, the stronger the defense. The more real the bond, the louder the fear becomes inside them. And if you do not understand this, you will misread everything. You will think their silence means they feel nothing. You will think their distance means they are done. You will think their inconsistency means you were never important. But in many cases, the exact opposite is happening. Sometimes an avoidant pulls away not because you mean too little, but because you mean too much. And that is the part most people never talk about. Casual connections do not usually shake an avoidant to their core. Surface level attraction does not threaten their emotional structure. Temporary people are easy to manage, but when someone enters their life and starts touching something real, something deep, something permanent, their entire inner world can begin to panic. Because now it is no longer just about liking someone. Now it is about what that person awakens in them. The need, the hope, the fear, the longing, the possibility of being seen. And for someone who has survived by staying emotionally self-contained, that kind of closeness can feel like standing too close to the edge of a cliff. This is why an avoidant can look calm on the outside while feeling chaos on the inside. They may still text you, still show up, still smile, still act composed. But internally, something has shifted. They are no longer just talking to someone. They are feeling attached. And attachment is where the real battle begins. Because once an avoidant starts caring deeply, they are forced into a silent war between two powerful needs. One part of them wants love, wants safety, wants connection, wants to stay. But another part has been trained for years to believe that closeness comes with pain, loss, pressure, or emotional suffocation. So now both forces are alive at the same time. One side pulls them toward you. The other side tells them to protect themselves before it is too late. That is why avoidants often become the most confusing when their feelings are the most real. They may pull away after intimacy, go quiet after a beautiful moment, become distant right after opening up. And to the person on the receiving end, it feels cruel, it feels cold, it feels like emotional whiplash. But in many cases, what you are witnessing is not a lack of care. It is emotional overwhelm. It is a nervous system that has not yet learned how to feel safe inside genuine connection. It is someone trying to hold on to closeness while also trying not to drown in it. Now, this does not mean every avoidant behavior should be excused. It does not mean silence is healthy. It does not mean mixed signals should be romanticized. But if you want to truly understand what happens when an avoidant sees you as the one, you have to stop looking only at the surface. You have to look underneath the behavior, underneath the distance, underneath the pauses, because that is where the truth lives. Not in the polished words, not in perfect consistency, but in the subtle shifts that happen when someone who normally keeps everyone at arm's length starts reacting differently to you. And that is exactly what this video is about. Not fantasy, not false hope, not empty signs that mean nothing, We are talking about the real psychological patterns that start showing up when an avoidant person realizes this connection is not ordinary anymore, when they know deep down that losing you would not feel like losing just another person. It would feel like losing the one connection that made them confront parts of themselves they thought would stay buried forever. Because when an avoidant truly sees you as different, they do not always confess it in obvious ways. They usually do not announce it with dramatic words. They rarely say, "I am terrified because you matter more than I expected." Instead, it leaks out in behavior, in tension, in contradiction, in small moments that most people overlook. And that is where people make their biggest mistake. They wait for loud proof, while missing the quiet evidence that something much deeper is happening underneath. The truth is, avoidants do not change for attention. They do not soften for everyone. And they definitely do not let just anyone disturb the emotional walls they built to survive. So when those walls start cracking even slightly, it means something. When they begin acting outside their usual pattern, it means something. When they start showing signs they never show with other people, it means something. And if you know what to look for, you will start seeing the difference between someone who is simply unavailable and someone who is deeply affected, deeply afraid, and secretly beginning to realize that you may be the one person they cannot emotionally outrun. And once that happens, everything starts to change. Not all at once, not perfectly, but noticeably, quietly, powerfully. Because the first signs are never loud. They are small, almost invisible. But if you understand them, they reveal everything. And in the next part, we are going straight into those signs. The first things avoidants start doing only when you begin to matter far more than they are ready to admit. And this is where things become painfully confusing, because when an avoidant starts feeling something real, they rarely move in a straight line. They do not always come closer in obvious ways. They do not suddenly become emotionally fluent. They do not wake up one day and know how to love without fear. What usually happens instead is much quieter, much stranger, and much more revealing. Their feelings begin showing up in behavior. They do not even fully understand themselves. And if you have ever felt like an avoidant was giving you signs that were too deep to ignore, but too unclear to trust, this is the part that explains why. One of the first things an avoidant does when they know you are not just another person is they keep coming back even after they pull away. And that matters more than most people realize, because avoidants do not repeatedly return to places that mean nothing to them. If someone does not touch them deeply, they usually detach and move on, cleanly, quietly. But when the bond starts reaching their emotional core, distance stops giving them peace. They may disappear for a while, become harder to read, feel impossible to hold on to, but something keeps bringing them back to your energy, your presence, your voice, your memory. And no, this does not always mean they are healed. It does not mean they are ready, but it often means you have affected them in a way they cannot easily shut off. That return is not random. It is internal conflict. It is the push and pull between fear and attachment. Part of them still wants space because closeness activates pressure inside them, but another part cannot fully let go because your presence has become emotionally significant. This is why an avoidant can leave a conversation unfinished and still think about it for days, why they can go silent and still check whether you are there, why they can act distant and still feel your absence in a way they never expected. This is not emotional peace. This is emotional disruption. And disruption is often the first proof that something inside them has changed. Another powerful sign is when they start revealing small truths about themselves. Not huge declarations, not dramatic confessions, but little openings that most people overlook because they seem so ordinary on the surface. They might casually mention something painful from their past. They might admit they have trouble trusting people. They might tell you about a hard day, a private fear, or something they usually keep locked behind their image of control. To most people, that may not seem like much, but for someone who survives by emotional containment, those small truths are massive, because avoidants are not usually afraid of talking. They are afraid of being emotionally exposed. They are afraid that if someone sees too much, that person will either use it, reject it, or expect more from them than they know how to give. So, when they begin allowing you into their internal world, even in tiny doses, it means they are testing a level of trust they do not give easily. It means your presence is starting to feel different from everyone else's. It means you are no longer standing outside the wall. You are standing close enough for them to wonder what it would feel like to let you in. And once that begins, something else starts happening. They begin watching you more closely than they admit. They notice shifts in your tone. They pick up on changes in your mood. They remember details you forgot you even shared. They may not always respond in the warm, expressive way people expect, but internally, they are paying attention, deep attention, because when an avoidant sees someone as emotionally important, they become highly alert to that person's emotional patterns, not because they are trying to control them, but because their nervous system is trying to understand whether this connection is safe enough to trust. This is why they can seem detached and observant at the same time. They may not ask, "Are you okay?" in the perfect way, but they notice when your energy drops. They notice when you sound different. They notice when you start protecting your heart. And when someone notices the emotional weather inside you without needing it explained every time, that is not nothing. That is investment. That is attention with emotional weight behind it. Then comes one of the most misunderstood behaviors of all. They begin testing your emotional safety. This is the stage where many people get hurt because it can feel like mixed signals. One day they seem close, the next day they seem withdrawn. One moment they are present, the next they become harder to reach. And if you do not understand what is happening underneath, it can feel like manipulation. But in many cases, what they are actually doing is watching what happens when they stop controlling the image. They are watching how you react when things feel uncertain. Will you punish them for shutting down? Will you shame them for struggling? Will you force intimacy before they are ready? Will you become emotionally explosive the moment they go quiet? These are not always conscious questions, but they live inside the behavior. Because avoidants often learned early in life that closeness came with emotional pressure, unpredictability, or pain. So now, before they fully trust love, they unconsciously test whether it is safe to relax around you without losing themselves. And one of the clearest signs that this connection is becoming real for them is when they remember the little things. The sentence you said once and forgot about, the thing that makes you anxious, the food you like, the story behind your silence, the detail about your childhood, the small dream you mentioned casually. These moments may seem simple, but they reveal something powerful: emotional storage. You stay in their mind. You stay in their inner world. You stay in places they usually keep reserved for survival, not sentiment. And that is the shift. Because when an avoidant starts carrying your details, your energy, your emotional patterns, and your presence more carefully than they carry anyone else's, it means you are no longer passing through their life lightly. You are landing somewhere deeper, somewhere more permanent, somewhere more dangerous to their defenses. And that is exactly why the connection starts affecting them in ways they cannot easily hide anymore. Because once an avoidant realizes you are not temporary, the emotional stakes rise fast. Their heart becomes more involved. Their fear becomes more active. Their need for control becomes more fragile. And that is when their behavior stops being only subtle and starts becoming even more intense, more vulnerable, and far more revealing than before. And this is the point where love stops feeling light to them and starts feeling dangerous in a way they can no longer ignore. Because once an avoidant realizes your presence is not just comforting but deeply important, the emotional pressure inside them grows heavier. This is where the connection starts moving from interest into impact, from attraction into emotional consequence, from "I like this person" into "this person has the power to affect me in ways I cannot control." And for someone who has spent years surviving through emotional self-protection, that realization can shake their entire inner system. One of the strongest signs that this is happening is when they begin making room for you inside parts of their life they usually guard with intensity. Their routine, their time, their habits, their private world. These things may seem ordinary to other people, but to an avoidant, they are deeply personal. Their structure is often where they feel safest. Their independence is not just preference, it is emotional armor. It is the place where they can breathe without feeling watched, needed, or emotionally responsible for anyone else. So when they begin allowing you into that space, even in small ways, it carries weight. They may start reaching out more naturally, letting you into their schedule, sharing corners of their day they normally keep to themselves, wanting your presence in the quiet moments, not just the exciting ones. And that matters because anyone can offer surface attention when things are easy. But when someone starts letting you exist inside their real life, their ordinary rhythm, their protected emotional territory, it often means your presence has become more than just desired. It has become significant. Another shift begins when the idea of losing you starts affecting them more than they want to admit. This is where their emotions become harder to hide because attachment always exposes what matters. They may not say, "I'm scared of losing you." In fact, most avoidants will never say it that directly, but it begins showing up in subtler ways. They react differently when you pull back. They feel your emotional distance more sharply. They become quieter when something feels off between you. They may even experience jealousy, not always in dramatic ways, but in quiet internal tension when they sense someone else could take your attention away. This is important because avoidants often try to appear unaffected. They want to look composed, in control, untouched. But when someone begins reaching a place inside them that feels irreplaceable, that mask becomes harder to maintain. Your absence starts creating emotional noise inside them, and even if they do not know how to say it, they feel it deeply. The possibility of losing someone who has become emotionally rare to them can trigger a kind of panic they do not know how to process, because now the connection is no longer something they can keep at a safe emotional distance. And this is where one of the most meaningful signs appears. They begin trying in ways that are imperfect, awkward, and deeply human. Not polished effort, not movie-style romance, not flawless communication, but real effort. The kind that only shows up when someone is fighting against their own wiring. They may start replying more consistently than before. They may try to repair moments they would once have ignored. They may stay in conversations that feel emotionally uncomfortable instead of escaping them immediately. They may check in after conflict instead of disappearing for long periods. They may even attempt to explain themselves, even if the words come out clumsy and incomplete. And if you are not careful, you can miss the importance of this because it does not always look smooth. But growth rarely looks smooth, especially for someone who never learned how to stay emotionally open without feeling threatened. When an avoidant starts trying, it often looks messy, hesitant, uncertain, but that does not make it meaningless. In fact, sometimes the messiest effort carries the deepest truth because it shows someone is moving beyond old patterns they once believed were untouchable. Then comes another powerful shift. They begin becoming aware of their own habits instead of just repeating them unconsciously. This is a major emotional turning point. Before, they may have shut down without reflection, pulled away without explanation, built distance without ever questioning why. But when the bond becomes too meaningful to ignore, something changes. They start noticing themselves. They start hearing their own patterns. They begin realizing that the things they do to protect themselves may also be the very things threatening the connection they do not want to lose. This is when you may hear things like, "I know I get distant," or "I don't know why I do this," or "I'm trying not to shut down." These may seem like simple statements, but psychologically, they reveal something huge: self-awareness under emotional pressure. And self-awareness is often the first step before real change, because people do not fight what they refuse to see. But once an avoidant begins seeing their own walls clearly, they are no longer fully asleep inside the pattern. They are beginning to wake up. And maybe one of the deepest signs of all is when they let you see them in moments where they are not emotionally composed. This is rare, because avoidants often work hard to appear stable, unaffected, and self-contained. They would rather look distant than needy, controlled than vulnerable, fine than overwhelmed. So if they begin letting you witness their sadness, confusion, frustration, inner conflict, or emotional mess without fully disappearing behind a wall, it means trust is starting to form at a level that goes far beyond attraction. Because letting someone see your polished side is easy. Letting someone see your unfinished side is where real emotional exposure begins. And for someone who has spent most of their life trying to hide the parts of themselves that feel too complicated, too emotional, or too difficult to hold, that kind of openness is not casual. It is deeply personal. It means they are no longer only trying to protect their image. They are beginning to risk being known. And that is what makes this stage so intense. Because what you are really witnessing is not just someone falling in love. You are witnessing someone being forced to choose between their old survival patterns and the one connection that makes those patterns feel too costly to keep. That is why this phase feels so emotionally charged, because love is no longer just a feeling inside them. It is now a decision pressing against every defense they built to survive. And once someone reaches that point, something even more powerful begins to happen. The fear is still there. The hesitation is still there. But slowly another force starts rising beside it. The willingness to stop hiding behind distance and begin showing love in a way that can actually be felt.